located down in Newmarket with Charlie Fellows, who's just moved into Bedford House Stables. Thanks very much for agreeing to talk to us today, Charlie, especially when you're in the middle of all this. Let's go straight into it. You've written a column in the Racing Post, which has proved quite controversial. One of the things you said in it was that you don't now see racing as a thriving sport. Can you elaborate on that?
So what I meant by that was I think there's a lot of negativity going around racing. There's quite a lot to be worried about. Obviously, we all know what's happened with bookmakers and FOBTs, and that has considerably, or will considerably, affect the amount of money coming into the sport. Prize money in England is already appalling, and that is no overstatement. We have the best product in the world. We have the most competitive product in the world. Everybody from around the world wants English horses, and our horses are generally thought to be the best. And yet we have the worst return pretty much in the world. I've been lucky enough to run horses all over the shop. And you look at how thriving their industries are, and in particular Australia. And it really hits home how much trouble we're in over here. So that was really what I meant. And a byproduct of that is that it's very, very difficult to encourage people to come into this sport, because they look at it and they think, well, I might as well just set light to money. Because 9 times out of 10, that's what you're doing. It's a hobby, I appreciate that, but it's an expensive hobby. And in other countries, it's considerably cheaper to do, and you have a chance of making money back. Here you don't. So for my job as a trainer, it's getting increasingly difficult to encourage people to come into ownership, and I rely on new owners.
Okay, now I've read that you fell in love with racing largely via Channel 4. I mean, is it just the prize money that's declined since those days? Is there anything else that you think has hit the back foot?
No, I think everything else is very strong. As I said, I think we breed and race the best horses in the world. There's a reason that people from Hong Kong and Australia and America come to England to buy our horses, because they know they are the best. And they also know that it's very difficult for us to make a return on our prize money, so we might be more willing to sell. And so in that sense, I think we still breed the best horse in the world. I think we have the best. I think everything really is very, very good and rosy. But there is one major underlying issue, and that is that it's a very, very difficult thing to sell to new people.
And that's largely because of the way it's funded by bookmakers.
It's 100% to do with it. It is decisions that were made years and years and years and years ago that we will never be able to reverse, that were huge errors of judgment, and have meant that as a result, bookmakers have shareholders that they have to look after, and racing is not as much as we would love it to be. You go to Australia and you have one TAB where all the money goes back in. The Tote doesn't have that here. Now, one of the things to be really positive about is that it looks like a really good group of guys who've got hold of the Tote and have got some really big ideas. I know a few of them very well. I train for one of them, and I know firsthand how bright, how successful, and how driven these guys are. So that is something that to be really positive about. And hopefully in a few years' time, we'll be looking back at their decision to purchase the Tote as being a real success story in the strength of British racing.
Okay, let's go back briefly. You're unusual. You sat here as the master of a very historic stable. But you're not born into racing, so tell us briefly a bit about your background.
No, not born into racing. I grew up quite close by to Newmarket, about 45 minutes away near Huntingdon. I didn't live at Huntingdon Racecourse. I probably have been there twice in my life. My father is a farmer in a slightly loose sense of the term. My mum was a member of a syndicate, which probably initiated that interest. And as you mentioned, I got gripped by Channel 4 racing. I don't know why, I don't know what it was. I love sport, I'm very competitive, and I really like racing. I like anything racing. I loved athletics when I was at school. I like motor racing. My dad was a motor racing driver one stage. And so I really like the idea of one person racing another from one point to another. And horse racing fed that big time. And I remember when I was younger, my friends used to come over at the weekend to play, and all I wanted to do was sit in front of Channel 4 Racing watching it on the TV. And it got me hooked, and I told my parents when I was 7 years old I wanted to be a jockey, mainly because I was completely idolised Frankie Dettori. But I'm now 6'3", and my dad is 6'7", and my mum is 5, so that was never going to happen. And when they very firmly told me that wasn't going to be a possibility, I said, well, then I want to train. And I think they thought that was a joke. I mean, not a joke. I think they thought it was just a phase that would wear out. There was no reason for me to want to train. I didn't have a clue what I was saying I wanted to do, but I just said I want to, and it never went.
So you went to Nicky Henderson for work experience?
I went to Nicky Henderson when I was 14 years old. He wouldn't remember it. I doubt many people there would remember it. I was there for 2 weeks. I'd ridden a little bit, and I did a crash course in the month leading up to me going to Nicky's, just getting me to ride a bit better. And I went to Nicky's, and I remember the first morning I got on and they legged me up on this horse, and I was so out of my depth. And we go into the covered ride, and this thing's mucking around, and I'm like, I'm off any minute now. Sure enough, had me off within about 5 minutes. Anyway, Nicky was great, and he put me on a few trotters, and for the first half of that week I was trotting round, and they wouldn't let me canter anything out, and I was some very safe horses. And then eventually he let me do a bit more, and finished up my last day, or last couple of days of my stay there, cantering up his big gallop. And that to me was just heaven. Being sat on the back of a horse going at 35, 40 miles an hour was exactly what I sort of imagined it would be.
Okay, so then you cut your teeth working for assistant to James Fanshawe.
Yep, so I had a succession of jobs in the summer holidays from there. I went to university, and I studied philosophy at Leeds University, which was great. It was probably one of the best decisions I've made in my life. I grew up, I met my wife, I got a degree, and I had a pretty good time doing all of it as well. So I did philosophy, and then I moved to Australia, came back from Australia after a year working over there, and I got a job with James as his assistant. And that was, gosh, I can't remember how long ago that was. I started up training in 2014, so it would have been about 2008, 2009. I did 5 years with James, and we had a great time. He'd had a little bit of a rough patch when I started, and numbers were down, and things weren't that easy. But I got on really well with James. We still are very close, and we just worked well together. And we had while I was there for 5 years, we had a fantastic time, and it's carried on since then as well. It's a succession of very good horses while I was there. From Spacious was probably the first one. She finished second in the Guineas. Then Society Rock came along, Deacon Blues, High Jinx, Seal of Approval, Ribbons. God, I hope I'm not missing any. A few others, but all Group 1 horses. And I had a great time. James is, in my eyes, and I think a lot of people's eyes, one of the best horsemen there is in the country. He's a fantastic trainer. He, for someone who has 80 to 90 horses probably, he normally churns out a Group 1 winner every year. There are trainers with double his horses that don't do that. So he's a serious horseman, and although I probably didn't know it at the time, I think the way I naturally think a horse should be trained is very similar to his, and I really enjoyed working for him. I learnt a huge amount, and there's definitely a lot of what I do now was moulded from my time at James's.
So was it that competitive streak you talk about that decided made you decide to go and take the plunge and go it alone?
Yeah, definitely. And I'd been with James for 5 years. Another year, I probably wouldn't have learned a huge amount more. James had been quite ill the last year I was there, and I'd had a bit more responsibility than I would normally have done. And when he got the all clear and was better, we sat down and he said, look, I think you're ready if you want to, and I felt like I was ready, and so we took the plunge at age 27, yeah.
So do you think, you've learnt everything from before you went on your own, from people that sort of employed you, mentors, etc. Have there been things that you've learnt that you thought along the way, I can definitely improve on that? And have you, since you became your own man?
So I think I'm not sure I'd say there's things that I think I have improved on. I would say I've sort of taken little bits from all the different trainers that I've worked for, and some of them you're like, God, I would never do that. And some of them you're like, I love that, that's really nice. So like in Australia, they love having horses living out as much as possible, horses turned out, and I really like that. I love the horses being out. We pick a lot of, we spend a lot of time picking grass, and I have pens where we turn the horse out, and I'd love some more. And again, part of the real appeal of Bedford House was that we've got lovely big paddocks where the horses can be turned out. So little things like that from him. James, I suppose I took his patience, his steadfast belief that horses, that you can give horses time and that it'll pay off in the end. And that really, a whole load of other things from what James did. Is there things I think I've improved on? No, I think I have improved significantly as a trainer. I look back on what I did 5 years ago when I set up training. I'm like, God, I can't believe I was doing things like that. And I think a lot of trainers that you speak to would say you never ever stop learning. You never ever stop improving. For example, Gay Waterhouse was over here for the July meeting, and she came to the yard here to come and have a look round. And I'd met her once or twice before, and she was with one of my owners. And we were walking around and talking, and my lads were, on a Wednesday, I trot up all of my horses for a vet. Just routine check over every Wednesday. And Gay was watching this, and she said, I've never seen anyone do that before. That's really interesting. And she was like, it's so interesting how you can go into another trainer's yard and you pick up little things. And she was like, even now, there's still things that I really like. I picked up trotting out horses off someone else, but it was something that she noticed from coming in. So that's just an example. I think that no matter how experienced you are, Gay Waterhouse, still she picks up sort of like a sponge of information. I will continue to do that until I retire.